She answered a stranger's ad to become his wife, but 3 days later, armed men showed up to take everything from her. The advertisement. The summer of 1883 had been unforgiving. Dust rolled across the plains like a living thing, creeping into barns, settling over fences, and choking the last green out of the grazing fields. Warren Hale stood at the edge of his ranch, his boots planted firm in the dry earth, watching a storm that refused to come. He wasn't a man easily shaken. Years of hardship had carved resilience into him the way wind carved canyons. But this year felt different. The cattle were thin. The hands had started leaving. And silence, heavy and unrelenting, had begun to settle over his land. He needed help, not just any help, a partner. That thought had come to him reluctantly one late night as he sat alone at his wooden table, staring at a half-burnt lantern. Marriage had never been part of his plan. Life on the frontier didn't leave much room for romance. But practicality, that was something he understood. So the next morning, he rode into town and placed an advertisement. Rancher seeking a wife. Must be strong, capable, and unafraid of hard work. Experience with livestock preferred. This is not a life for the faint-hearted. The townsfolk had laughed when they heard about it. Looking for a wife like you'd hire a ranch hand. One man joked at the saloon. Warren didn't respond. He simply took his drink and walked away. Because deep down, he knew something they didn't. He wasn't looking for love. He was looking for survival. Miles away, in a small Missouri town, Delilah Carter read the advertisement for the third time. The paper trembled slightly in her hands, not from fear, but from something sharper. Determination. Her life had never been easy. After losing both parents by the age of 17, Delilah had taken over the small family farm. She had learned to plow fields, mend fences, and ride horses before most girls her age had learned to sew. But no matter how hard she worked, the debts kept growing. And now, the bank had given her a final warning. She had two choices: lose everything, or leave. Her eyes lingered on the words again. Must be strong, capable. A faint smile touched her lips. That sounds like me, she whispered. 2 weeks later, Warren Hale received a letter. He sat on the porch as the sun dipped low, reading the neat, steady handwriting. My name is Delilah Carter. I am 22 years old and have managed a farm on my own for the past 5 years. I can ride, work cattle, and handle a rifle if needed. I am not afraid of hardship. If you are serious about your offer, I will come. Warren read it twice, then a third time. There was no softness in the words. No hesitation, just quiet confidence. For the first time since placing the ad, he felt something shift. Maybe this wasn't a mistake after all. The day she arrived, the entire town seemed to know. A train whistle echoed through the valley as Warren stood near the station, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He wasn't sure what he expected. But it wasn't this. Delilah Carter stepped off the train wearing a simple dress, her boots dusty from travel, her hair tied back in a loose braid. She carried only one small bag. And yet, there was something about her. Not fragile, not uncertain, steady. Her eyes scanned the platform until they found him. You Warren Hale? She asked, walking straight toward him. Her voice was calm, direct. Warren nodded slowly. You Delilah? That's right. A brief silence passed between them. Then Warren gestured toward his horse. Long ride ahead. Delilah didn't hesitate. She set down her bag, adjusted her skirt, and mounted the horse with practiced ease. Warren raised an eyebrow. Not bad, he muttered. Delilah glanced at him, a hint of challenge in her eyes. You expected different. Warren almost smiled. Most women who answered that ad wouldn't even know how to get on a horse. She shrugged lightly. Then they shouldn't have answered. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. But it wasn't uncomfortable. The wind carried the scent of dry grass and distant rain. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. After a while, Warren spoke. This isn't an easy life. I didn't come looking for easy. You might regret it." Delilah looked ahead, her posture straight, her grip steady on the reins. "I don't regret decisions," she said. "I make them." Warren studied her for a moment. There was no arrogance in her tone. Just truth. When they reached the ranch, Delilah didn't wait for instructions. She dismounted, tied the horse properly, and walked the perimeter with a careful eye. She noticed the broken fence post, the half-empty water trough, the cattle grazing too far apart. "You've got problems," she said simply. Warren leaned against the fence, watching her. "I'm aware." She turned to him. "I can help fix them." Warren crossed his arms. "You just got here, and I already see what needs doing." Another silence. Then Warren nodded once. "All right," he said. "We'll see what you can do." That night, they sat across from each other at the table. Two strangers, bound by an agreement neither fully understood yet. Warren poured coffee into 2 cups and slid one toward her. "No ceremony," he said. "No fancy promises. This is a partnership. We work together, we survive. That's it." Delilah picked up the cup, her gaze steady. "And if we don't?" Warren met her eyes. "Then we lose everything." She took a sip, then set the cup down. "Then we won't fail." Outside, the wind began to pick up. And somewhere far off in the distance, thunder finally rolled. Fire on the horizon. The storm didn't bring rain. It brought lightning. Delilah woke before sunrise to the sharp crack of thunder echoing across the plains. For a moment, she lay still, listening. The wind howled against the wooden walls, rattling the shutters like restless hands. Then she smelled it. Smoke. She was out of bed in seconds, pulling on her boots and grabbing her jacket. By the time she stepped outside, the sky was still dark, but the horizon glowed an angry orange. "Fire! Warren!" she shouted, already moving. He was out the door just as fast, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the distance. It took him only a second to see it, the flames tearing through the dry grassland to the west, moving fast. "Too fast. Wildfire," he muttered. "Lightning must have struck the ridge." Delilah didn't wait for more explanation. "How far?" "Close enough to wipe us out by noon if the wind keeps up." For a brief moment, they stood there, the weight of the situation settling in. Then Delilah spoke, her voice sharp and focused. "We move the cattle, now." Warren hesitated, not because she was wrong, but because of how quickly she'd taken control. "That fire's moving toward the south pasture," he said. "If we don't cut it off, we won't have time to fight it," she interrupted. "We save what we can." Their eyes met, a challenge, a decision. Then Warren nodded once. "All right, let's move." Within minutes, the ranch was alive with motion. Warren saddled the horses while Delilah grabbed ropes, water skins, and anything they might need. There were no extra hands, no workers to rely on. Just the two of them. "Take the east side," Warren called. "Drive them toward the river bend." Delilah swung onto her horse. "You better keep up." And then she was gone, riding hard across the open field, her braid whipping behind her like a flag. Warren watched her for half a second. Then he followed. The cattle were already restless, sensing the danger before they could fully see it. Smoke drifted across the land, thick and choking, turning the morning light into a dim, eerie glow. Delilah rode straight into the herd, her movements precise, controlled. "Move," she shouted, guiding them with sharp turns and quick bursts of speed. A few of the cattle bolted in the wrong direction, toward the fire. Without hesitation, she chased after them. Warren reached the opposite side, circling wide to cut them off. He expected chaos, panic, mistakes. Instead, he saw something else. Delilah wasn't just holding her own. She was leading. Her timing was exact. Her instincts were sharp. She anticipated the herd's movement before it happened, steering them away from danger with a confidence that left no room for doubt. Warren felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest. respect. But the fire was gaining. The wind shifted suddenly, sending flames racing faster across the dry land. The crackling roar grew louder, closer. Too close. Delilah, Warren shouted, we're running out of time. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes scanned the land, calculating. Then she pointed ahead. There, a narrow path between two rocky ridges led toward the river, a natural funnel. If we push them through that gap, they'll make it, she called. Warren frowned. It's tight. If they panic, they won't, she said firmly. Not if we stay ahead of them. Another moment, another decision. Then Warren gave a sharp nod. Do it. They rode harder than ever before. The heat from the fire pressed against their backs, the air thick with ash and smoke. The cattle surged forward, driven by fear and instinct. The gap loomed ahead, narrow, dangerous, but it was their only chance. Delilah pushed her horse to the limit, reaching the front of the herd. She turned sharply, guiding the lead animals toward the opening. Easy, easy, she murmured, her voice steady despite the chaos. For a heartbeat, it worked. Then one of the cattle panicked. It veered sideways, crashing into another, and suddenly the entire herd began to bunch up, confused, frightened, on the verge of a stampede. Warren, she shouted. He reacted instantly, riding along the flank, using his rope to steer them back on course. Keep them moving, he called. I'm trying. The fire roared closer. Time was running out. Delilah took a deep breath, and made a choice. She rode straight into the front of the herd, cutting across their path at full speed. Her horse reared slightly as she turned sharply, forcing the lead animals to follow her movement. For a split second, everything hung in balance. Then, the herd surged forward, through the gap. On the other side, the land sloped down toward the river. The cattle rushed toward the water, finally slowing as they reached safety. Delilah pulled her horse to a stop, breathing hard, her face streaked with soot. Warren rode up beside her, equally exhausted. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They just watched as the fire swept past the ridge behind them, consuming everything in its path, but missing the herd. Missing the ranch. Barely. You were right, Warren said finally. Delilah glanced at him. About what? About everything. She let out a small breath, somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. Don't sound so surprised. I'm not, he said. Then, after a pause, not anymore. Their eyes met again, but this time, something had changed. The distance between them, once sharp and clear, had softened. Later that evening, they returned to the ranch. The land to the west was blackened, scorched beyond recognition. But the house still stood. The barn still stood, and the cattle were alive. Delilah stepped down from her horse slowly, her body aching. We were lucky, she said. Warren shook his head. That wasn't luck. She looked at him. What was it, then? He held her gaze. That was you. For the first time since she arrived, Delilah didn't have a quick answer. She simply looked away, a faint hint of something new in her expression. Not pride, not defiance, something quieter. That night, as they sat across from each other again, the silence felt different. Less like two strangers, more like something beginning. Warren poured the coffee, then hesitated before speaking. You didn't come here just to survive, did you? Delilah met his eyes. No, she said softly. I came here to build something. Warren leaned back slightly, considering her words. Then, slowly, he nodded. Then we'll build it, he said. Outside, the fire burned itself out in the distance. And for the first time, the ranch felt alive again. Shadows from the past. The morning after the fire felt almost unreal. The sky was clear, washed clean of smoke, and the air carried that rare, cool freshness that only came after destruction. But the land told a different story. To the west, the earth was scorched black, the grass reduced to ash. Delilah stood at the edge of it, arms folded, silently taking it in. We'll have to rotate the grazing, she said. The north pasture won't last long on its own. Warren stepped beside her. You're already planning weeks ahead. That's how you keep a ranch alive, she replied. You don't wait for the next problem. You get ahead of it. Warren glanced at her, a faint hint of a smile forming. You always this serious? Delilah's lips curved slightly. Only when it matters. For a moment, the weight of everything they'd been through seemed to lift. But it didn't last. By midday, a cloud of dust appeared on the distant road. Warren noticed it first. Someone's coming, he said, narrowing his eyes. Delilah followed his gaze. A single rider, moving fast. Friend or trouble? She asked. Warren didn't answer right away. Out here, he said finally, it's usually both. The rider didn't slow as he approached. His horse was lathered with sweat, pushing hard even as it neared exhaustion. When he finally pulled to a stop in front of the house, the man swung down quickly, barely tying the reins before stepping forward. He was tall, sharply dressed compared to most men out here, with a long coat coated in travel dust. His eyes scanned the ranch, not with admiration, but calculation. Then they landed on Delilah, and something in his expression changed. Well, he said, a slow, knowing smile forming. I was wondering how long it'd take to find you. Delilah went still. Warren noticed it immediately. You know him? Warren asked, his voice low. Delilah didn't answer. The man stepped closer, brushing dust from his sleeve as if he had all the time in the world. Not going to introduce me, he said lightly. That's not like you, Delilah. Warren's posture shifted, protective without being obvious. You've got business here, say it. The stranger's gaze flicked to him, amused. And you must be the husband, he said. Warren Hale, I presume. Warren didn't react. Who are you? The man tipped his hat slightly. Name's Victor Kane. The name seemed to hang in the air. Delilah's fingers curled slightly at her sides. What do you want? She asked, her voice controlled but tight. Victor's smile widened just a fraction. Straight to the point. I always admired that about you. Answer the question. He took a slow step closer, his boots crunching against the dry dirt. I came to collect what's owed. Warren's eyes hardened. Owed. Victor glanced between them, as if enjoying the tension. Oh, she didn't tell you. He said. That's interesting. Delilah's voice cut in, sharp as a blade. There's nothing to tell. Victor chuckled softly. Now that's not true. Warren stepped forward, placing himself slightly between them. You're going to explain, he said, or you're going to leave. Victor studied him for a moment, then sighed as if inconvenienced. All right, he said, let's keep it simple. He turned his attention back to Delilah. 5 years ago, when your farm was failing, you took a loan. Delilah's jaw tightened. Warren glanced at her, then back at Victor. From you. Victor spread his hands. From associates of mine. How much? Warren asked. Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. Enough. Delilah finally spoke, her voice steady despite the tension. I paid it back. Victor tilted his head. Some of it. All of it, she shot back. He took another step closer, his tone lowering. You paid what you could. But there was interest. Terms. Agreements. Warren's expression darkened. What kind of agreements? Victor's gaze flicked to him again, amused. The kind people don't read carefully when they're desperate. Silence fell. The wind picked up slightly, carrying the faint scent of burned earth. Warren looked at Delilah. Is he telling the truth? She didn't answer right away. And that was answer enough. I was going to fix it, she said quietly. Before it reached this point. Victor clapped his hands once, slowly. There it is. Honesty. Warren turned back to him. What do you want? Victor's smile returned, sharper now. The land. Warren didn't even hesitate. No. Victor raised an eyebrow. You sure you want to answer that so quickly? Yes. Victor let out a soft laugh. I admire the confidence. Truly. He walked a slow circle around them, taking in the ranch, the barn, the distant cattle. "You've got something good here," he said. "Would be a shame if something happened to it." Warren's hand drifted slightly closer to his side, not reaching for a weapon, but ready. "You threatening me?" Victor stopped, facing him again. "I'm offering a solution." Delilah stepped forward. "There is no solution that involves you taking this ranch." Victor looked at her, studying her in a way that felt far too familiar. "You always were stubborn," he said. "That's what got you into this mess in the first place." For a moment, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Then Warren spoke, his voice calm but firm. "You've said your piece. Now you can leave." Victor didn't move. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded document. 3 days, he said, holding it up. "That's how long you have." Warren didn't take it. Victor stepped closer and pressed it into his hand anyway. "After that," he continued, "the dead becomes mine to collect, however I see fit." Delilah's eyes flashed. "You won't touch this land." Victor leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "We'll see." Then, just like that, he turned. He mounted his horse with practiced ease and rode off without another word. The dust from his departure lingered long after he was gone. Warren stood there, the paper in his hand, his jaw tight. 3 days. He looked at Delilah. "You were going to tell me." She met his gaze, guilt flickering beneath her steady expression. "I didn't want to bring trouble here." "You think this isn't trouble?" "I thought I could handle it." Warren shook his head slightly. "On your own. I've always handled things on my own." That hit harder than anything else. Warren stepped closer, his voice quieter now, but stronger. "You're not on your own anymore." Delilah looked at him, something shifting in her eyes. "I know," she said softly. "That's why I stayed." The wind moved through the ranch, carrying both the promise of change and the shadow of what was coming. 3 days, and everything they had built was at risk of being taken away. The line we draw. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Warren stood at the table, staring at the document Victor Kane had left behind. The words were clean, official, too official. Signatures, numbers, clauses. All of it crafted to look lawful. All of it meant to take everything. Delilah stood across from him, arms folded tight, her eyes fixed on the same paper. "He's not bluffing," she said. "I know." Silence settled between them again, but this time, it wasn't uncertain. It was focused. "We've got 3 days, Warren said. "So we don't waste a single hour." Delilah nodded once. "Then we fight it." Warren glanced up. "You got a plan?" She hesitated, just for a second. "Not yet," she admitted. "But I know men like him. He's not just relying on paper." "No," Warren said. "He's relying on fear." Delilah met his eyes. "Then we don't give him any." That same afternoon, they rode into town. The streets were quieter than usual, the memory of the wildfire still hanging over everything. A few townsfolk glanced their way as they passed, some curious, some wary. Word traveled fast out here. And trouble traveled faster. Their first stop was the small office near the end of the street, a weathered building with a crooked sign that read, "Attorney and Clerk." Inside, the air smelled of ink and old paper. A thin man with round spectacles looked up from behind a cluttered desk. "Can I help you?" he asked. Warren stepped forward and placed the document on the table. "We need to know if this is real." The man adjusted his glasses and unfolded the paper carefully. His eyes moved quickly across the lines, his expression tightening with each passing second. After a moment, he exhaled slowly. "It's real," he said. Delilah's jaw clenched. "There has to be something." The man hesitated. "There might be." Warren leaned forward slightly. "Might." These kinds of contracts, the clerk explained, they often include clauses meant to trap people. But they also require proof of enforcement. Witnesses. Claims filed properly. Delilah caught on immediately. "So if he skips steps, he weakens his position," the clerk finished. Warren frowned. You're saying we wait for him to make a mistake? I'm saying, the clerk replied carefully, you make it hard for him not to. Outside, the sun hung low in the sky as they stepped back onto the street. That's not much to go on, Warren said. It's enough, Delilah replied. He looked at her. You've got something in mind. She nodded slowly. Victor doesn't just want the land. He wants control. He wants us to back down. And we won't. No, she said firmly. We won't. That night, they worked. Not just on a plan, but on the ranch itself. If Victor came back expecting weakness, he wouldn't find it. They repaired fences under lantern light, reinforced the barn doors, checked every inch of the property like they were preparing for a storm worse than the last. Because in a way, they were. At one point, Warren paused, watching Delilah as she hammered a loose board into place with steady precision. You've done this before, he said. She didn't stop working. What? Fighting like this? Standing your ground? Delilah drove the nail in, then finally looked up. My father used to say, she began, that people like Victor count on one thing. What's that? Silence. Warren leaned against the fence slightly. And you? Her eyes held his. I don't stay silent. The next morning brought tension. Every sound felt sharper. Every movement carried weight. By midday, a rider approached again. But this time, he wasn't alone. 3 men rode with Victor Kane, their presence loud even in silence. They spread out slightly as they neared the ranch, not aggressive, but not friendly either. Warren stepped forward, his stance firm. Delilah stood beside him, equal, unyielding. Victor dismounted slowly, dusting off his coat like he had all the time in the world. Well, he said, glancing around. Still standing. That's good. Warren didn't respond. Delilah spoke instead. You're early. Victor smiled faintly. I like to stay ahead of schedule. His eyes moved between them, studying. Have you made a decision? Warren held up the document. You're not getting this land. Victor's expression didn't change, but something colder slipped into his eyes. That's unfortunate. One of the men behind him shifted slightly, as if waiting for a signal. Delilah noticed. So did Warren. You'll want to reconsider, Victor continued, his voice smooth. Because the alternative is you trying to take it by force. Delilah cut in. Victor looked at her, amused again. I prefer to think of it as persuasion. Delilah stepped forward. Then here's our answer. She reached out, took the paper from Warren's hand, and tore it in half. The sound was sharp, final. The wind caught the pieces, carrying them across the dirt like scattered ash. For a brief moment, no one moved. Victor's smile disappeared, slowly, completely. Well, he said quietly, that was a mistake. Warren stepped forward, his voice low and steady. No, he said, that was a line. The men behind Victor shifted again, this time more openly. The air tightened, the kind of moment where everything could break. Then, a voice called out from the distance. Hold it right there. All heads turned. A small group of riders approached from the road, townsmen. Not many, but enough. The clerk rode with them. And behind him, others who had heard, who had chosen. Victor's eyes narrowed. This doesn't concern you, he said sharply. One of the townsmen shook his head. It does now. The balance had shifted. Not completely, but enough. Victor looked back at Warren and Delilah, something dangerous simmering beneath his calm. This isn't over, he said. Warren met his gaze. We know. Victor mounted his horse again, his movements sharp now. Enjoy your 3 days, he added coldly. You'll wish you hadn't wasted them. And then, he rode off, his men following close behind. The dust settled slowly, the tension eased, but didn't disappear. Delilah let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That won't stop him, she said. No, Warren agreed, but it changes things. She looked at him. How? Warren glanced toward the townspeople, then back at her. Now, he said, he knows he's not just dealing with you. Delilah's expression softened slightly. Are you? She added. Warren shook his head faintly. No, he said, he's dealing with us, for the first time since Victor arrived. That word felt real, but as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the land, one truth remained clear. The real fight hadn't even started yet. The night they came, the night felt too quiet. No wind, no rustling grass, not even the distant call of coyotes. Just silence, the kind that made a person uneasy without knowing why. Warren sat on the porch steps, a lantern dimly lit beside him, his rifle resting across his knees. His eyes scanned the darkness beyond the fence line, every shadow stretched thin under the pale moonlight. Behind him, the ranch slept, but not deeply, not tonight. Inside the house, Delilah stood by the window, watching the same darkness from a different angle. Her reflection stared back at her, tired, but sharp. Ready. She had learned long ago that danger didn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes, it waited. A soft creak broke the silence. Warren's head lifted instantly. Not the house, the barn. He stood slowly, gripping the rifle, his boots silent against the dirt as he stepped off the porch. At the same moment, Delilah opened the door behind him. You heard it, she said. Warren nodded once. Stay here. She gave him a look. Not a chance. I'm not staying behind, she said quietly. For a second, he considered arguing. Then he didn't. All right, he said, but you stay close. They moved together across the yard, keeping low, every step measured. The barn loomed ahead, dark, still. Too still. Then, a flicker. Light. Inside. Warren's grip tightened on the rifle. Fire, he muttered. Delilah's eyes sharpened. They're trying to burn it. Without another word, they ran. The barn doors were slightly open, smoke curling out through the cracks. Warren kicked one door wide, and flames burst into view. Small, controlled, set, buckets. Delilah shouted. They moved fast, grabbing water from the trough, throwing it over the growing fire. Again and again, until the flames began to weaken. But then, a sound behind them, footsteps. Warren turned sharply. 2 men, inside the barn. Before either side could speak, one of the men lunged forward. Warren reacted instantly, swinging the rifle to block the attack. The wood cracked against the man's arm, sending him stumbling back. The second man moved toward Delilah. Big mistake. She didn't retreat. She stepped forward. Grabbing a loose wooden pole from the ground, she swung it hard, catching him across the side. He staggered, surprised more than hurt. But it was enough. Get out, Warren shouted, forcing the first man back toward the door. The flames flickered behind them, smoke thickening the air. The 2 intruders exchanged a quick glance. Then bolted. Warren chased them to the door, watching as they mounted their horses and disappeared into the night. He didn't fire. Didn't need to. The message had already been delivered. When he turned back, Delilah was still inside, stamping out the last of the flames. You all right? He asked. She nodded, breathing hard. Yeah. He stepped closer, scanning her quickly for injuries. I told you to stay close. A faint, tired smile crossed her face. I did. The fire was out, but the damage was done. Not to the barn, to the peace. They're not waiting 3 days, Delilah said, stepping outside. No, Warren replied. They're trying to break us before that. She looked out into the darkness where the riders had vanished. Victor doesn't want a fight in daylight, she said. He wants us tired, scared. Warren shook his head. He picked the wrong people. They didn't sleep after that. Instead, they prepared. Before sunrise, Warren rode into town again. This time, not for answers. For allies. By mid-morning, he returned with more than just supplies. 3 riders followed behind him. Men who had seen enough, and decided where they stood. Delilah watched them arrive, a quiet understanding passing through her. You trust them, she asked. Warren dismounted. I trust what they've chosen. She nodded slowly. That's enough. Later that day, as they reinforced the barn again, one of the men approached Warren quietly. Those weren't just hired hands last night, he said. I've seen one of them before. Warren glanced at him. Where? The man hesitated. With Kane, he said. Back east. Warren's eyes darkened. What do you mean? The man lowered his voice. I mean he's done this before. He doesn't just take land, he runs people off it. Nearby, Delilah had gone still. She turned slowly. How? She asked. The man met her gaze. Threats. Fires. Sometimes worse. Silence followed. Heavy. Warren looked at Delilah. You knew. She shook her head, her voice quiet. I knew he was dangerous, she said. I didn't know how far he'd go. Warren exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening. Well, he said, now we do. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the land. Everything felt sharper now, clearer. That evening, as they stood together near the fence line, Delilah spoke. Softly. This is my fault. Warren didn't even look at her. No, he came because of me. He stayed because he thought we'd fold. Delilah turned to him. And if we don't? Warren finally met her eyes. Then he'll wish he never came at all. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Delilah stepped closer. Not out of fear, not out of doubt, but because she chose to stand there. With him, the wind returned that night. Stronger, carrying the promise of something coming. And somewhere out in the dark, Victor Kane was watching, waiting, preparing, because the next move wouldn't be a warning. What we fight for. The third day came with no warning. No rider on the horizon. No dust cloud in the distance. Just a stillness that felt wrong. Warren stood near the fence line at sunrise, his eyes scanning the land like he could force danger to reveal itself. Behind him, the ranch was awake. Men moved quietly, checking horses, loading rifles, reinforcing what little could still be reinforced. They were ready, or as ready as anyone could be. Delilah stepped up beside him, her presence steady, grounding. He's coming, she said. Warren didn't look at her. Yeah, a pause. Not like before. This time, Warren did glance at her. No, he agreed. Not like before. Hours passed. The sun climbed. And then, dust. Riders. One of the men called. Warren's posture stiffened. Delilah's hand tightened slightly at her side. This time, Victor didn't come quietly. 5 riders. Spread wide. Confident. Certain. They stopped just beyond the fence. Victor Kane sat at the center, calm as ever, his sharp gaze sweeping across the ranch, taking in the men, the preparations, the resistance. Well, he called out, his voice carrying easily across the distance, this is impressive. Warren stepped forward, stopping just short of the fence. You're done here, Kane. Victor tilted his head slightly. Am I? Delilah moved up beside Warren. Not behind him, never behind. Victor's eyes found her, and for a brief second, something colder flickered there. You had your chance, he said. You could have walked away. Delilah's voice was steady. So could you. A faint smile touched Victor's lips. But I don't walk away from what's mine. Warren's jaw tightened. This isn't yours. Victor gestured lightly. According to the law, you twisted. Warren cut in. Victor didn't deny it, didn't need to. Silence stretched. Then one of Victor's men shifted forward slightly. A signal, subtle, but clear. Warren saw it, so did Delilah. This is your last chance, Victor said, his tone losing its charm. Walk away, both of you, and maybe you keep what's left of your lives. For a moment, no one moved, no one spoke. Then Delilah stepped forward, just one step, but it carried everything. No, she said. The word landed like a strike. Clean. Final. Victor's expression hardened. Then you've made your choice. Everything happened at once. One of Victor's men pushed his horse forward. And Warren raised his rifle. Don't, he said. The air snapped tight, but before anything could break, another sound cut through the moment. Hoofbeats. Fast, loud, growing. Everyone turned. From the road, more riders appeared. Townsmen, more than before, armed, determined. They rode hard, closing the distance quickly, spreading out as they approached the ranch. Not chaotic, organized. Victor's confidence faltered. For the first time, Warren didn't take his eyes off him. Looks like you're outnumbered. Victor's jaw tightened. He glanced around, recalculating. The balance had shifted. Again. This isn't over, he said sharply. Delilah stepped forward again, closer to the fence now. Her eyes locked on his. It is, she said. You just don't want it to be. Something in her voice, not fear, not anger, certainty, made the moment heavier than any weapon. Victor held her gaze for a long second. Then another. And then, he looked away. A small thing. But out here, it meant everything. Mount up, he snapped to his men. No argument this time, no delay. They turned, rode out, faster than they had come. And just like that, it was over. The dust settled slowly. The tension broke in waves. Men lowered their weapons. Horses calmed. Breaths released. Warren stood still for a moment longer. Watching, making sure. Then finally, he lowered his rifle. Beside him, Delilah exhaled softly. He's not coming back, she said. Warren nodded once. No, he agreed. He's not. The townsmen gathered nearby, offering quiet nods, a few tired smiles. No celebrations, just understanding, because they all knew what it had taken to stand there. As the others began to disperse, Warren turned to Delilah. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he said quietly, "You stayed." Delilah looked at him, a faint smile touching her lips. "I told you," she said, "I don't regret my decisions." Warren let out a breath, half a laugh, half something deeper. "This ranch," he began, glancing around, "it wouldn't still be standing without you." Delilah shook her head slightly. "No," she said, "it's standing because we didn't let it fall." That word again, we. Warren stepped a little closer. Closer than before. This wasn't just a partnership, was it? He asked. Delilah held his gaze. For a moment, just a moment, the strong, unshakable woman softened. "No," she said quietly. "It wasn't." The wind moved through the fields again. But this time, it didn't carry fear. It carried something new. Warren reached out slowly, taking her hand. Not as an agreement, not as a deal, but as a choice. Delilah didn't pull away. In the distance, the cattle moved calmly across the land. The scorched earth would heal. The fences would be rebuilt. The ranch would grow again, and this time, it wouldn't be built on survival alone. It would be built on something stronger. Trust, respect, and something neither of them had been looking for, but had found anyway. Please friends spot my channel. Subscribe, like, share, comment. Subscribe for more stories. Thanks for watching.